What's going on, guys? Welcome to Zero Fidelity, and today I'm actually pretty excited to share with you all my thoughts on what may be the most affordable, fully assembled BBC LS3 5A type speakers out on the market. So whether you're a fan of the BBC sound or just a fan of small speakers that sound really good, I think you'll be interested in this review. So let's get right to it.
Oh my God, I see you clearly now. In my dreams, you're here with me somehow. Call my name and I'll make...
Alright guys, so before I begin, let's get three things out of the way. Number one, they retail for only $730 a pair. They're made by a fairly obscure manufacturer in China named Mistral Audio. And number three, I do not believe they're officially licensed by the BBC. But you know what? That's okay. I'm going to go forward with the review simply because throughout the production of the LS3 5A, 11 manufacturers have been given a thumbs up officially to produce this type of speaker. And that's not including the manufacturers that have made clones or carbon copies of this design. So when I look at this speaker, I look at it like an extension of a portfolio. So with that being said, let's talk about the speaker itself. Alright, so I admit if you're not familiar with the LS35A design, you're probably looking at the speaker and going, what the hell is up with the Velcro and the felt and all that stuff? So here's what's happening. Number one, let's talk about the Velcro. Now obviously this is a way that you attach the speaker grills to the speaker, but it's really just paying homage to the original design. Because remember, this actually stems from the late 60s. That's when this whole thing started. So it's just them paying homage to the original design. Nothing more, nothing less. And then the felt, well, that's actually to absorb diffraction from the tweeter, and that just prevents the tweeter from really interacting with the rest of the speaker, particularly in the baffle, and just getting lost in this concave here. So that's all that's happening. Now, as far as the speaker itself is concerned, it's actually pretty well made. Now, is it as well finished as my much more expensive Harbeth P3 ESRs? Hell no. It also doesn't quite have the same heft to it, but for the money, yeah, it's actually very well made. I have no complaints. Now, the driver complement is going to be a 0.75-inch soft dome tweeter that has a metal shell on the outside, and on the bottom, we're going to have a 5-inch woofer. Now, going to the back, you're going to notice a decent set of binding posts, and this is going to be impressive. This plate right here is actually metal. This is not a sticker. And over here, you're going to have some of the basic specs, the power handling, 50 watts. The impedance is going to be 11 ohms, which I know you BBC nerds are going to be interested in. And then the frequency response is the typical 65 hertz to 20 kilohertz. So yeah, pretty simple, straightforward design. Now let's talk about how it sounds. Alright guys, so to keep this section nice and easy, what I'm going to do is I'm going to break it down into two parts. The first part is going to be dedicated to those of you who are already familiar with the BBC sound, and the second part is going to be dedicated to, well, everybody else. So first and foremost, hello BBC nerds. Your question is going to be, do these speakers sound like a proper set of LS35As? And the answer is, yeah, actually, I would say yes. Now, there's going to be two caveats here. Number one, you cannot expect these speakers to perform on par with, say, a set of Falcons or Harbeths. Those are going to be better speakers, and I'll get into that later on in the review. But it does capture all of the tenets that people like about the BBC sound, and that's the important part. And for the money, yeah, it's phenomenal. Now, number two, it's important to note that where the drivers cross off, I feel like there's just a little bit of thinness going on throughout the lower treble, upper mid-range, which, funnily enough, is something that I think some people would actually prefer over the fuller sound of other designs. And that's just because certain instruments actually benefit from that voicing. But other than that, yeah, I would say that these speakers definitely earned the designation. So now we're going to roll back to the regular person. So here's the deal. You've heard me say BBC LS35A a lot. There's a big deal about it. What's the big deal? And the big deal is naturalness. These speakers were designed to excel particularly with human speech. And they are known world over for having some of the best vocal performance of just about any type of loudspeaker. And it just so happens that they also are pretty good with other forms of music, albeit simple forms of music. So That's the whole crux behind the LS3 5A, is giving you this naturalness of tone. It's not about impressing you with big bass. It's not about impressing you with sparkly highs or having an overly plump mid-range. It's about having a naturalness. When you listen to them, it's supposed to sound relaxing and real. And I'm proud to say that for the money, okay, and I have to emphasize this, for the money, the Mistrals are exceptional in that regard. I mean, for $730, I genuinely, and I mean this, I genuinely can't think of any other product that sounds more natural, particularly throughout the mid-range, than these. The characteristics is going to be like this. This is a speaker that's neither laid back nor forward. It's going to be kind of right there, so it's not going to present stuff that's in your face, nor is it going to be ultra laid back. I guess if it does have to air, it will be slightly laid back, but we're talking about ever so slightly. The top end is, for the most part, going to be pretty smooth. This speaker rolls off at 15 kilohertz, and even though it extends to 20, it starts a pretty sharp roll off at 15. And what that means is you can play just about any type of music through it, and it's not going to send you rushing out of the room. In fact, funnily enough, this tweeter, maybe it's because it's a soft dome, is actually a little bit smoother than even my significantly more expensive Harbeth P3s. And the mid-range, you know, it's something that I can't describe unless you hear it, but the mid-range does have this naturalness to it, this accurate timbre that just does music justice, and really all types of music. I mean, whether you're listening to Led Zeppelin, Linkin Park, no, this speaker's not really capable of, you know, hitting you in the chest. It doesn't have a whole hell of a lot of bass, but it just has that right tone that even dynamic music sounds engaging to listen to because of it. So yeah, the mid-range, just natural. That's all I can describe it as. It's just very natural. And the bass is going to be quick. This is going to be more about quality than quantity. Now, there's not a whole lot of bass to it, which actually makes it a very ideal solution for those of you who want to listen to music without disturbing everybody else in the house, or if you have neighbors that are right next to you because you live in an apartment or townhouse. This is actually a really ideal situation. So overall, yeah, these speakers are great, and they can throw out a pretty wide sound stage as well, depending on how you hook them up. But like everything, it's not all perfect, so let's get to some of the more obvious compromises now. Alright, so this is going to be straightforward just because we're dealing with a compact sealed monitor, which means if you like big bass, yep, this is an easy pass. If you like listening at loud volumes, this is definitely an easy pass. And it's important to mention that when I speak about naturalness, this is going to be limited more to simple music. We're talking about vocalists, guitars, pianists, stuff that's pretty easy to handle. This is where the speakers really come into their own. And it's not to say that they suck with rock or hip-hop or whatever the case may be. It's just that simple music is where they're really in their element. But really, their only major weakness has nothing to do with performance and everything to do with support. Mistral is a small company. They don't even have a distributor in the United States, and I'm guessing they don't have a distributor in many parts of the world, which means if something goes wrong with these speakers, while they'll supply you with the parts, provided it's under warranty, you're going to be the one that has to service it. And therein lies the compromise with getting something like this for well under $1,000. If you could live with that, though, I do think there's an argument to be made for giving these a try. Now, before I go to my final thoughts, I know some of you are going to want to know how these compare to a real LS3 5A speaker, so let's briefly touch on that right now. Alright everybody, I'm not sure how well the camera can pick up on all the fine details, but to our left we're going to have the Harbeth P3 ESR. Now this speaker retails for $2,000 US, and in the rosewood finish I have here actually pushes the price up to $2,300 US for the pair. And to our right, of course, is going to be the $730 Mistrals. Now, how do they compare? Well, first and foremost, it's actually important to note that the Harbeth is just a little bit bigger. It's a little bit deeper than the Mistrals. But in terms of build quality, I mean, again, I'm not sure what the camera's picking up on, but there's a huge difference. The rosewood finish here, the wood finish, I should say, is just much richer. It's done to a much higher degree of craftsmanship. It's important to note that this uses legally sourced timber, and this is just an heirloom quality product. This is something that you pass down to your kids, and once you get it serviced, they can pass it down to their kids. And it's not to say the Mistrals will not last as long if properly taken care of, but it just doesn't have that heirloom quality to it. And that's really a lot of what you're paying for when you do pay that extra money for a pair of P3 ESRs. As for the sound, everything about the Harbeth is pretty much better. And it's not to say the Mistrals are bad, but let me give you, for example, the mid-range, which is the best attribute of both speakers. They both sound great, but the Harbeths dig deeper into the recording and they just sound more natural. They just sound good, period, regardless of price. Whereas the Mistrals sound really good for something under $1,000. Now, when it comes to bass, there's no comparison. The bass on the P3 ESRs is much deeper. It's much more powerful. Whereas the LS35's Mistrals, they sound more like what you would expect from a speaker at this size. Now, the top end is where things get interesting. The Harbeths use a metal dome tweeter, which in a way is a good thing because it kind of gives instruments and whatnot this certain realistic grit and bright. But the bad side is some recordings actually bring out the metallic nature of the speaker, and it can sometimes sound a little artificial. The Mistrals over here use a soft dome tweeter. It's a little bit smoother, maybe a little bit more forgiving of poor recordings, but it doesn't quite have that realistic grit. What you may prefer ultimately comes down to personal preference. Now, ultimately, people are going to ask, well, what speaker should I go with? It's simple. If you're on a budget and you say, hey, I want to get that BBC sound, but I can't really justify or afford a pair of $2,000 speakers, get the Mistrals. You're going to love them. But I will say this, if you're a passionate audiophile and music lover, and you can flip the, you can open your wallet and basically pay for something like this, do it. You'd have no regrets. So that's just my take on it, guys. And now let's move on to my final thoughts. Man, I mean, what a great time it is to be an audiophile. Because even though it's nearly impossible to audition something before you buy it, on the flip side, it seems like there's a solution for everybody. I mean, let's use the Mistrals as an example. If you're somebody who has a budget of under $1,000, if you value natural tonality, if you're somebody who's all about quality over quantity, and if you're somebody who likes to listen and enjoy your music without pissing off everybody around you, this is a damn good solution. And on top of that, this is a speaker that offers a big slice of the BBC pie at a super affordable price. So yeah, all in all, what can I say? I really like these speakers. So provided the service thing doesn't bother you, it's going to be very tough for me to bypass recommending them. Pretty damn good for what they are. So with that said, guys, that's my final thoughts on the Mistral LS3 5As. Thanks for watching, and until next time, peace.